as I'm getting older and in the autumn of my years, I'm giving myself permission to be labeled eccentric. Like people saying, oh, well, that Liz she's a bit eccentric, which allows that total freedom of people not judging you as much, but kind of putting you in this acceptance pool. And then I think you, Rima, said, well, I don't think you have to be older to want that. And why can't you just be that? Why can't we all just be that now? And that triggered the difference between being accepted or fitting in better or just being yourself, and the beauty in believing in your own beingness.
Belonging is being accepted for who you are. Fitting in is being accepted for being like everyone else. And I think as a society, we don't know the difference, especially when we're young. Liz, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Rima, for asking me. I always love to um, open my heart and my soul because you ask such great questions and you come from that same place. So
Thank you.
thank you for asking me.
I'd love to start right off by talking about the idea of fitting in. You've had incredible careers throughout your lifetime, Fortune 500 companies, and all kinds of stuff. But let's go to fitting in, even from when we're young, and what damage it really does to us. Would you share with me from the depth of that?
Sure. We started to talk about this morning, not intentionally, but it just came out, and it was. I said, you should do a pod series about this, and then you said, no, we should do a pod series about this, and it was talking about that exact thing about what is the difference between. I know what triggered it. I said, as I'm getting older, and in the autumn of my years, I'm giving myself permission to be labeled eccentric. Like people saying, oh, well, that Liz she's a bit eccentric, which allows that total freedom of people not judging you as much, but kind of putting you in this acceptance pool. And then I think you, Rima, said, well, I don't think you have to be older to want that. And why can't you just be that? Why can't we all just be that now? And that triggered the difference between being accepted or fitting in better or just being yourself, and the beauty in believing in your own beingness. So for me, it brought up a story when I grew up in Chicago in a very European family. My father came here from Romania, and my mother was born here, but her parents are from Romania. So it was a very ethnic background that I grew up with in a pocket in Chicago, where there was our church, which my father had been a minister, so we're very religious, and it was a Romanian Baptist church. And this whole community on the north side of Chicago was this group of people. They had a youth group, and I was about 3 years younger than the median age of this youth group, which was probably, I would say, 16 to 19. So, so I was about 12, 13, tall for my age. So I didn't look that young, but I was. And they knew, of course, how old I was. And my mother was very assertive in wanting me to, quote, fit in. So she would push me to their extracurricular activities, such as going bowling after church in the evening or doing something with the group. And I felt that they really didn't want me there because 2 or 3 years is a big deal when you're that age. Might as well say it's 10 years difference. And I just felt like I wanted to try to please them. I wanted to be a chameleon. I didn't feel like they really accepted or wanted me there. So everything I did with caution and kind of looking around and, feeling very uncomfortable. like, am I saying or doing the right thing? And I didn't want to be there. But my mother was, really pushing me because she wanted me to be integrated into this world. And I hated it. And I think it created for me the stigma of insecurity, that it's hard enough going into your teens, uh, even then, and harder now, I think, with all of the social media exposure and bullying and all of that. That's another conversation. But I think it was really a struggle, and that stayed with me for a long time. So that was the start of it.
I think it's amazing that so many things that occur in our youth, and we're not yet trained enough, we're not wise enough to recognize that these pieces are going to impact us throughout our lives in different ways. So your mom, in her thinking, pushing you to fit in was to expand who you are, but on the inside, it was really helping you escape within, and your self-esteem was being dinged without you even paying attention, because how would you know at that age?
Right. I mean, you don't. And she would also go another step further. She would compare me to the
Mm.
girls in the church. And it added to my insecurity. And now you can always go back and criticize the way that you were parented or the way that you were raised. I asked my mother one time, Mom, much older, when we were adults beyond, why did you do that? And she said, I wanted you to be better. So in her mind, she wanted the best for me, both in wanting to be accepted in their circle and also because they were older, she thought that I could grow from them and see them as models so that different things that I could get better in, I use them as comparisons, but yet it had the opposite effect. I just felt less than. And she didn't do it for malicious reasons. She did it in her own way because she thought it would help me. So it was innocent.
Very innocent. It's hard to look back at any parents that's raising kids and know that they're not doing it for the love of their kids and for the betterment of their kids. How,
Yeah.
however, honestly, the whole self-development field came because of this, because every generation is expanding a little bit more than the previous generation. And for us to come back to ourselves and really become who we are so that we can belong and not simply fit in, because we're not looking to fit in. That's the whole idea, is that we're not looking to fit in. We're looking to belong and understand each other. So for you, you started there, and then you went on to get married and get into careers. How do you think those pieces that are now in your psychology were impacting you? Because I can tell you a lot of my childhood stuff definitely made me who I am today because of what I've seen. So how did those pieces, and when did you start to identify? Like, go, oh, that's what's causing that. That's how
Yeah.
I'm doing this.
Very good question and very good observation. I want to go back to something that you said, that so much of our formative years and why psychiatrists and therapists spend so much time in our first 7 years, because that period in time is when we really form the basis of much of our personality, from our parents, our environment, what we come into this world with. And it's always going back to, what do you remember during those first 7 years? Well, I skipped and talked about a preteen or being just entering the teenage years, but it was all of it. It was how you felt you were fitting into the world, so to speak, and where was your place in the world. Move forward to the period after getting married and starting my career. How, to answer your question, how did those formative years, and particularly that feeling of wanting to fit in because I felt so uncomfortable, affect me later in life? Well, definitely it was something that was ingrained in me then. I think it was a double-edged sword in that I learned to read energy as a survival mechanism, and I got quite good at it with a strong intuitive power that I think I was born with, but it got further enhanced as a guide, so to speak, for survival. And when I started to work in marketing, at first as a secretary, because they didn't, that, there was not even a glass ceiling, there was just so many other obstacles that they weren't giving jobs, marketing jobs, which was my background, to women, because they would leave and have babies, and they gave it to men that were the family breadwinners. So I started that way, and I was progressing quite rapidly. And then I got out of secretarial work and became a very junior product manager. And they had to have a board of directors meeting at one of the companies. It was the RG French company, French's Mustard in New York, where they really had to have a meeting to have a first woman in a marketing position. And my first job title was spice clerk. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if they wanted me to go into supermarkets and dust off the shelves of the spices, but it was the beginning of a marketing position. And I was surrounded by men. I was the first woman in marketing in that company and several other companies. So how did I benefit from fitting in? And I could read the energy. And it was really interesting because so many of the men, it was kind of a divided essence that I felt. Some treated me as, let's wait and see. Can she carry the mail? Can she deliver the mail? And others immediately put me in, well, she's taking a job that belongs to a man, and because she's fairly attractive, who does she know that got her in that position? Okay, so I learned to kind of navigate between those two worlds and worked harder to prove myself. And that kind of fitting in or feeling like I was not an equal really carried throughout my life until I got a lot more assured, and through therapy and through success and through living life, it got better. But it's still there. That tinge is still there, if I'm really honest with myself.
Thank you for saying that, Liz.
Yeah.
That a lot of those things that we experience and we work on to grow out of, they pop their heads in at different spaces because all of a sudden you're in a different arena, you're in a different something that those pieces come back up. So for you talking about fitting into a man's world, which in some ways a lot of women still struggle with that, even in today's world, throughout the world, they're attempting to fit in instead of standing out, being eccentric, being themselves, so that we can come to a better world of people showing up and really creating big impacts. It's gotten better. It's gotten better.
Yeah, and and again, this is not a feminist talk. It was more like, how do we spread our wings and be the real we that we are, the real person that we're inside, rather than worrying about fitting in. But it's all parts of that even today, that there are so many things that go on. Like you said, we're still not even on even keel. A woman is paid, I think, 80 to 85 cents on the dollar compared to a man, sometimes even 75 cents on the dollar versus a man at a dollar. And so the inequity is still there. Not always. We have more CEOs that are women. We have more, senators and House of Representatives that are women. So we've come, I don't want to say we've come a long way. I think it's taken us a long time to get where we are. And I'm sad that it has taken as long as it has. But I think if we keep acting more like ourselves and less fearful of acting like we think that everyone else wants us to be, that's a real key to success and personal power and happiness. I'll give you one example. I'm not going to mention the company because they're a huge company and they're a very powerful marketing company. And I worked for them and I was a major consultant and they were in the beauty business. But they were not in the fast lane, so to speak, of New York or where a lot of couture fashion exists. They were located more in the Midwest, and their top executives wanted to know how can they raise the bar for the philosophy and the feeling of fashion to permeate the company, and particularly the marketing people, men and women, but especially the women that were working in it. How did they keep them in tune in the middle of America? And I said, well, first of all, you're encouraging your women to dress like miniature men. They look like little penguins with their suit and their power bow, which kind of took the place of a man's tie, or a single strand of pearls, and their regulated shoes and and he said, well, why don't you work with some of the women as another woman that has worked in cosmetics and in the fashion business? So I did. And I would have some group sessions with the women, and they felt, oh my gosh, no, if I started to wear a really vibrant dress and with a lot of jewelry, I won't be taken seriously.
Mm.
And I said, no, that's wrong. It's up to you to start coming out, so to speak, because you have the ability and you have the interpretation of what fashion means. And then you're showing the world that you have ingrained it inside of you to be able to feel it. So that was one example of what I mean. It was just, to me, it was very surprising.
Excuse me. What's not surprising, Liz, is we're still touching on the same thing. They were attempting to fit in to what they believed is expected out of them in that company, in that society, in that venture. And you touched on it earlier. Our key to expanding out of all of that is to come back to each of us really becoming more ourselves,
Yeah.
and our individual beingness, and really having that diversity exist versus having copycats of individuals in the world. We have gotten much better. We have gotten much better.
Yes.
But that's still that feeling that, especially when we're talking to women, there's still that feeling that you got to fit in, or you got to do certain things to be accepted, especially on social media, especially in certain standards where you have to hold a certain standard where you don't see it as much with men. And that's still hitting on our psychology and on fitting in. And we need to expand out of it still. I don't usually go to those topics and say that we still need to work on things, but we need to work on us. So now you're in a different stage of life. You're not working with the big companies, but you have your own business, you have your coaching, and you have your own artwork and different things. But how do you feel right now at this stage, having been in big companies, traveled the world, done all those things, and can recognize some of the ways that you still worked on fitting in? And now what would you like to do at this stage?
Well, that's a pretty powerful and big question because it hits my vulnerability today. If I'm really honest, I'm at a change in my path from, as you say, leading a pretty big marketing career for many years with Fortune 200 companies, running their marketing departments internationally and worldwide. That's a pretty ego-fed position. And when I say ego-fed, yes, it does go to your head that you start feeling like you're the commander of the universe in many ways when you have many people working for you and you have the responsibility, and you're getting on jet planes and you're traveling worldwide. It's a heady diet. And then when that stops, and then you're saying, okay, where's my place in the world today? And you're at a different stage in your life. I consider myself, I think the phrase is in the autumn of my life. I think it's a Frank Sinatra song. But I'm in the last part of my life. And I have a lot of living still that I want to do. So I don't feel retired, or I'm just changing into a new chapter and a new adventure. And I genuinely feel that way. However, now who am I, and where do I fit in, or where can I be, and how do I express myself uniquely my own way and yet help people the way that I want to? And it's been a real challenge because my ego still works and says, well, anything that you set up is so minor and so small and so insignificant that it's really not going to help anybody. So why are you doing it? When you've been on such a big stage and now you're funneling into something more local, or even on the internet, even if it's reaching a workshop on the internet, it's so different from what I did that I poo-poo it and minimize it, and minimize myself by doing that. And therein lies the issue of training your mind to say, are you still trying to fit in, or are you believing in yourself enough to spread your wings, to be that eccentric person in some ways, maybe building your own path and taking a path less traveled and going for it? And I'm facing that right now, and it's been hard. It's been, there have been days when I just want to pack up my tent and say, I don't know what I want to do. So it's been, to feel that vulnerability is really hitting deep, deep in my heart.
I really, really appreciate you saying these things, because a lot of women and young women will look at someone that is doing so well, or will look at someone like you who's had an incredible career, and will believe that you have it all together, that life is wonderful, that you have no issues. And they go away from reality of that you're constantly working on yourself. At every stage, you're working on yourself. And you started a whole venture of finding hidden courage because of your daughter and what she went through. But it has kind of evolved to finding hidden courage in showing up, being yourself. And those are not easy topics. We say them, we say the words, but for people to face the things that they have grown through in their life is not as easy as simple words. What have you worked on for your own sake? And you're teaching some of it. What have you worked on that you go, this piece has worked and I'm still working on this?
Well, first of all, that finding hidden courage, that whole pathway started with losses.
Mm-hmm.
The loss of two husbands and a daughter. Actually, she was my niece, but she was a daughter to me. And that was kind of the last straw. And I said, what is this about? I didn't call this in. I didn't call all this death in. And on some maybe psychic or spiritual level, I don't know, above me, some yet to be developed, I did call it in because I believe that we all are architects of our own life, that yes, things happen to us that are completely out of our control, but our control is what we do in response to it. And I was devastated, and I was in that deep, deep valley of dark night of the soul. And I was reaching out, and some very kind people helped me with a helping hand and suggested the spiritual path that I got on, and it saved me in so many ways. And I wanted to tell my story because I knew my story was not unique, unusual, but I always learned from other people, even more than books or classes. From the human experience is my greatest teacher. And so I wanted to tell my story, and I interviewed 11 other people. And as part of that, I had been studying art expression, which is a modality for getting into the recesses of the unconscious. It is not painting pretty pictures. It's not artwork. It's not art that you're going to hang on your wall. It's none of that. It is using water-based crayons and color, and you get into a meditative stage, and you work with people that have blocks or are trying to overcome just different things in their life that have affected them deeply, but are keeping them from living the life that they want. And regular therapy and other things perhaps didn't work as effectively, or there's residue, or they're just not feeling whole like I was, not feeling like I really was working on all cylinders, so to speak. And I took this training course at one of the California universities, and then I started working with hospice people that had just been through losses. And we did this art expression, which is basically doodling, doing shapes and colors and using whatever comes to mind, but starting from a meditative place. And there would be a small group of us in a room, very private, and there was no judgments. No one was trying to say, oh, that's a pretty picture, or is that a flower, or is that a bird? It was none of that. It was, first of all, the person that had put this together would tell the group how they felt about it, what was in their field, what were they feeling when they did this, and what was it expressing for them. And then the real beauty came in when these were usually women's group, and the other women would comment, oh, I see this as possibly a part of maybe your heart that was really sad. And I see that color symbolizing maybe happiness over there. And they would start adding things to it. So it became so alive, and such a process of letting go and releasing things that were in the subconscious that they weren't even aware of. So when they left this small session, they walked away with feeling changed and different, and not in a huge dramatic way, but in a way where they felt lighter and a little bit more in touch with themselves. And I thought, this is powerful. This is a lot more powerful than maybe some modalities of therapy. And I'm not knocking therapy, because I've done a lot of therapy and it's very beneficial. But because of my love for art, anyway, we did this with the 11 people that I interviewed, and I brought them in, and we had some mini groups, and I painted kind of my own feeling of what their journey was about, separate from the art expression that we did. And I put it in a book and on a website, and that's what Finding Hidden Courage was all about. And since that, and that was done 2 years ago, it was launched last March on Amazon, and it was a bestseller for when it was launched, and I'm very proud of it. But then it's been all this time that I've tried to figure out, well, can I continue this in a way that could serve people? And here is what the question that you asked, and kind of long-windedly I went on. My fear of fitting in came back again. Not the part of me that was eccentric or feeling strong about myself, but that vulnerability. Am I really helping someone? Am I really good enough? Can I really get to helping someone where it's worthwhile for them to come and yet alone pay some money to do this and all of that? And it stopped me. It just made me freeze. And so now it's taken me almost a year to start saying, I'm going to go for it. And, it'll be an iterative process, and I'll crawl before I walk, before I run, and we'll see. I've seen the power of it. I believe that I have that spirit within me. So there is that same fitting in versus being myself. And now from fitting in, I'm transitioning to being myself.
I think it's tremendous for you to share all of this. And I've been in one of your art classes. And I will definitely say what you're terming as small changes, well, small hinges swing big doors. And we never know the effect that it's having on someone and what piece it really impacts. So I've been in your workshops, and it's those things that pile up, that little drops of you becoming you again and letting go of all the things that the world says you have to be, and you start to go, no, I don't need to be any of that. I don't need to be sad. It gives you that power to start to take back who you are and become who you are. So I'm thankful for you, Liz, and I'm thankful for the authenticity, so that people don't look and go, of course she can do all of that. She's done all of this. No, you still have your own struggles that you're going through.
Well, and I think of you, Rima, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot of your vulnerability, but you came to this country as a teenager, young teenager. And I just talked about my vulnerability as a teenager when I was born here. And I saw my father as an immigrant struggle. Here you are in a strange country. You didn't speak the language. On top of it, you're in your really sensitive years. And when kids can be cruel, we've talked about bullying, and we talk about how nasty they can be. You had to go through so much that I have to ask you, how did you start exercising your own ability from fitting in and surviving to becoming Rima?
It took a long period, Liz, to be honest. The first
Yeah.
few years, I put my head down and attempted to escape in my own ways, as if none of the stuff that was going on around me existed, even though it impacted me a lot, all the comments and the smirks and the things. So I rushed through high school so that I can get through. I even rushed through college because I still didn't fit in. I learned the language, but because, like you mentioned, you grew up in a certain culture and you hung around that same culture. Same thing with any immigrant. You usually end up hanging around your own culture and you don't open up yourself to what else is around you and start to really expand your perspective and who you are. So that didn't occur for me literally as me till way past college, till I started become a lot more accepting, a lot more understanding, and letting go of a lot of the beliefs that I had with me from my childhood, from my culture, from all the things that say you are this. And then you start to see that the world isn't just this, the world is this and this and that. And you start to go, oh, okay, I'm gonna allow more things in and release some of the things that weren't serving me. But that took a lot of years to get to that perspective. And in some ways, people would look at me and go, oh, she's doing great because I had good grades. I did well. So I hid in my own way socially so that I don't show that I'm not fitting in. I'm not telling even my best friend that I feel that I'm out of sorts. I don't fit in at the high school. I don't fit in at the college. I don't do the same things they do because my culture and my life at that time was different till I started to allow it to merge. So that was one way that I can look back and go, if I could go back and teach a family about being more included, belonging, not included, belonging. Allow yourself to expand and see what else is around you. Open up your thought process. Don't be stuck in the only things that you know, because everyone is attempting to protect what they know, but what you know is not going to get you further ahead in life. It's going to keep you where you are. I know that now and can share that now. I couldn't have shared those words back then, but now I can say those things. I'd
Yeah, I
like,
wish, yeah, I
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead, Liz.
I wish if there was any message, if there's any young women, or no matter what the age is, or young men, this is not just germane to the female sex. And it's so hard to hear from an older person to a younger person because I'm not preaching, I'm speaking from my heart. Start believing that you have your own uniqueness, no matter what it is. And even if it's a small thing, start with something that speaks to you. Let's say it's a certain kind of music that really makes you come alive. I just picked that. Um, dig into it, learn more about it, learn how it fills up your soul. Start developing your own individual interests in what speaks to you. You don't have to tell anyone. You can just do it yourself and start to feel your own enjoyment and confidence. I was so worried about, again, that fitting in that I took on everybody else's ideas of what they thought was cool or fun or whatever. I didn't have that self dialogue to myself in my private moments to say, what do you cultivate? What makes you smile? What do you love? I remember I was taking piano lessons pretty early on. I think I started at about, I don't know, 9, 10, something like that. And I took it for 8 years. And at first I had to do it because my parents wanted me to. But I enjoyed it. I started with the violin and I was horrible. Oh my God. My father would sit patiently, and I think I finally convinced him it was like fingernails down a blackboard. It was horrible. I was terrible at it. And my sister had played the piano, so in our culture, the classics were really important to learn. And I benefited from it much later. But anyway, I started playing. As I started to play a little bit, I took on some popular music that meant a lot to me. In my moments of either sadness, I would go to the piano and it was like I was pouring my heart out, playing these pieces. No one was around. It's like writing in your diary or your journal. For me, it was very similar. And I did it, and it made all the difference in the world. And it was wonderful. It was so beautiful that it was a part of me that I was understanding, that I was going deep into, that made all the difference in the world. So I use that as an example for anyone out there that is listening to this. Listen to your own heartbeat, listen to your own heart steps. Have those moments where you have some inner dialogue at what brings you joy, what brings you, and you don't have to share it with anyone, just start cultivating it for yourself. Because I didn't until I was much older. And if I can impart anything, do it earlier for yourself. Yeah. Did you do any of that remote, when those hard times of integrating into society, and how did you find your own kind of, I say grounding, your own place where you could go during all of this trauma?
I didn't have any one thing that I would do that I'd say allowed me to find my peace. It was more of attempting to work on how do I fit in but yet be myself. I would ask myself those type of things, but wasn't totally sure how to do it. That's why I say it took me a lot of years to come to that conclusion. Because in my younger years, I still felt that someone else's word was more important than my word. Like if my dad would say something, that's more important than what I felt. And it took me years to know that no, my word, my own intent is what's the most important thing, because no one is going to live my life for me. So I didn't figure that out till much later. So the way I got through those years is by excelling in the things that didn't have to be personal, whether it's work, whether it's school. So I put my energy into that versus going, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? How do I understand all this? It took me all those years to get to that point to reverse and go, I don't have to prove myself. I have to be myself.
Wow. I mean, did you have that somewhat during your teenage years?
No, way
Much
past it,
later?
way
Yeah.
past that. I mean, I was sensing it, but wasn't open to still standing up for myself per se.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of teenagers don't stand up for themselves. It doesn't mean they got to become belligerent or in any way mean to anyone else, but really becoming more of themselves. And my solutions, if I could say to young individuals and a lot of the bullying that's going on,
Yeah.
that still goes on, if we can switch to curiosity instead of judgment, that will shift a lot of things that you don't understand. Instead of making fun of someone, come from a curiosity. I would like to know more about this. I'm not familiar with this. I think that would change a lot of the tones of how we do things and allow us to kind of sink more into, oh, okay, I understand this. I can see this perspective. I can learn from it. Those are little things that can be shifts for a lot of us. I would love to talk about something a little edgy still on the fitting in. As we mature, our personal relationships and the way that we look, the way that we have partnership, how that works with fitting in, and how society still attempts to say that you got to be a certain way. How have you worked on yourself, Liz, to go, I still have these challenges, but I'm not looking to fit in? Because the young women and young men go through the same thing. I don't think it's any different now than as young generation, but maybe we're a little wiser. We have a little more tools that we can rely on, possibly. So, what are some of the things in personal relationships that you go, I still struggle with that, even
Yeah.
though
Yeah, it's a good question for all of us, because I'm still going through it and I'm still learning. And I realize that I fall back on my standard of measurement being the old classic way. As an example, I have been married and I've lost husbands, and I like being married. And I am a widow now, and I have been since 2008. So a long period of time, and it's still foreign to me, since I've been married most of my adult life. And I've enjoyed being married, and didn't want to lose my husbands and all of that. Yet now, as a single woman in where I am now, I'm finding that it's not necessarily the course of action for me to be married or to be in that situation again. So I'm saying I have a significant other, and I've had a relationship now for 6 years that has been wonderful, but it is, quote, out of the box. We don't live together, we're not married. And people assume when they see us together that we are, if they, now the people that know us know, but it's still strange to me sometimes. And it feels sometimes very uncomfortable. And even though it's good and it's working for both of us, I still use the old measurement of, well, probably if someone's married and you're living together, it's a better situation. That's not true. We're all entering a different phase of looking at things in a different way. And I'm meeting more and more women and even men that enjoy their alone time, and they may even be extroverted, but they like a varied field of things to do. They may still be, committed to one person that they're seeing and have a relationship, but they don't feel the need necessarily to go the conventional route. So I see that as a major shift in relationships. And I think it's healthy. I also say that when I see another shift, when people are leaving different careers, even if they're in their mid-career and not in, quote, retirement age, they're leaving more of the traditional jobs because they're not feeling fulfilled and they want to work at home or they want to see more of their family. And so since COVID has changed a lot of things too. And a lot for the better, some not so much for the good, but by and large, I think for the better. I think companies are now reevaluating a different way of honoring their employees and giving them more time where they can spend time with their families, and they actually are more productive in many ways. A lot of studies have been done. If you go to Europe, they take a month off on vacation, usually a month of August, and they really value the time off. If you go to Japan, they're more neurotic than we are. They work even longer hours. So it's very interesting culturally what we're seeing, but there are definitely shifts and differences happening that are shaking up the traditional value system. So at first I felt like I'm not fitting in again, that whole fitting in. Instead, I'm saying, no, I'm doing this part of my life in a different way. And even my family doesn't understand. They see me, well, why don't you get married? And especially as you're getting older, you should have someone under the same roof. What happens if you fall? And all of these crazy things like that person is going to be hooked at the hip with you. It's ridiculous when you think about it. So yeah, I see that some of those changes happening, which I think are actually for the better.
I laugh because you hear those type of statements from a lot of people, but it's not reality of what is possible for a lot of people, and not fitting in is the new standard.
Yes. And we have to be careful that we don't go so much to one side. But at the same time, I see a progression of challenging the traditions in some ways to say, does that fit for me? Or am I still trying to fit in? Or am I really being and honoring myself?
I'm going to ask you about something because you come from the beauty industry, Liz, and the impact the beauty industry has on all of us.
Yeah.
For us to look a certain way, to be dressed a certain way. I'm going to say, especially for females.
Yeah.
What is your perspective today that you would love women to really understand, whether they're in their early 20s, in their 30s, or they're changing careers, retire? What is your perspective now that you go, I wish they would understand it now?
Well, here was a young gal that was very insecure. I was tall and gangly. I think I was really a not attract. I was an ugly baby. I see pictures of myself next to my nieces, and I had a huge head, no teeth, no hair. I mean, I grew up as a tomboy. I was never interested in dolls except as a companion. I was really a tomboy, and I entered teenage years, and because my mother pushed me, I became a rainbow girl, which is a Masonic organization where you wear long formals. And she pushed me into organizations where I would become more feminine, I guess is the way of saying it. And, I started to mature and grow more aware of boys, of wanting to look good, of fitting in again, looking at 17 magazine and looking at these models and saying, oh, I had acne. Oh, what am I going to do? I had zits. I don't have their legs. I don't have this. I don't have that. Just like we all do. It's again those teenage years. But as I grew, I became more aware of how to work with myself to maximize the way that I looked. I wanted to look good. And so I just kind of slid into this persona, I guess, of makeup and really caring about myself. I was never athletic, but I was never heavy or super thin. I was just kind of average. And then as I started to progress and then get into the fashion world, there was an even more emphasis on being thin, on having the right clothes, more than I've ever seen. You were like, wow. It was The Devil Wears Prada is a great movie that epitomizes a lot of what I'm talking about. The fashion world taking themselves extremely seriously, and almost to the aspect that it's like the cure for cancer. I mean, just so serious. And I would say today, and I've known many women today that have actually let their hair grow gray, and they call it the COVID look. And I think it was actually quite lovely in the sense of being more in touch with themselves. Unfortunately, our society still has this labeling where a man can be gray headed and have wrinkles and look distinguished. A woman is looking old if she doesn't do something with her wrinkles and she doesn't color her hair and all of that. We're starting to shift, but it's a real slow shift. And I look at teenage girls today and the filters and all of the social media that goes on that distorts figures and puts so much emphasis on, getting butt enhancements and getting breast implants and getting all of this liposuction and all of these plastic surgery when you're 17 years old. And I say, wow, please think about that. Don't fit in to the best of your ability. Look at yourself and find your own enjoyment of the way you look. And if you want enhancement for something, go for it, but do it for yourself, not because you're feeling pressured. And really stop and ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if it makes you feel good, you personally, then do it. And if it doesn't, but you're feeling peer pressure, that should be a sign. I am not an expert because I am vain. I care about the way I look. I color my hair. I have a friend that has beautiful gray, silver gray hair. I wish I had her guts. I don't. So I'm aware of that and I acknowledge that. But I don't rush out to a plastic surgeon and try to do, everything else to fight my age. I try to do the best that I can with what nature gave me and enhance it as best as I can and look, that satisfies myself as much as I can. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. We're all works in progress, that there is no one size fits all for all of us.
Sure.
And the more that we can look at things and not worry about fitting in and caving in to society, the easier it's going to become for us to see a better world, a more loving and understanding world. I know when I'm teaching my classes, and most of them are young men and women, 18 to 28, I sometimes show up on purpose with no makeup,
Yes.
pull my hair back and just show up. And I've had them make the comments like, why aren't you dressed? Why aren't, it's like, and I make that a point so that we can discuss things about, where is that coming from? Is that the purpose of you showing up for this and learning about yourself and really expanding who you are? Learn where those thoughts are coming from. And is that good for you? Is that good for the people that are around you? And really, they become lessons. They're not easy lessons, because it's not easy to show up and go, okay, I'm just going to pull my hair back and I'm just going to show up and I'm not going to care that the lighting isn't right. It's not easy because it's all in our psychology.
It is.
We got to look a certain way. So it's
Yes.
beautiful to be, at least to address them so that we can expand. Liz, you and I could talk for hours. I know there's a lot of things to still cover, but for the sake of time, I'm going to say, can you give me one last thing? If I put you in front of a whole group of women, every age, you kind of touched on it. What would be one thing that you say to them to do for themselves?
First of all, just look at yourself in the mirror. Make eye contact with yourself and say, you're the only you that I have. I love you. And I know that sounds strange, but I truly love you. And I want to be the very best me that I can be. And beyond that, that's all I can be. And if I believe in myself, everyone else will too.
Liz, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
truly
Rita.
love and appreciate you. And to all our listeners, I hope you got a lot of the gems. You have these conversations with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues. Open up the conversation line so we can make things better. And remember, our attitude always determines our altitude in life. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Rima. Bless you.
Love you.